Today we have Mr. Earl Wyatt. Mr. Wyatt is the Executive Director of MoveAmerica, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to strengthening America's industrial base and supply chains to enhance national security and economic competitiveness. He is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. He has led efforts in emerging technologies, rapid prototyping, and defense acquisition. Mr. Wyatt has also played a key role in advancing defense innovation, which makes him a leading voice in national security and technology advancement. And then I am your moderator today, and I am the strategic communications lead for MoveAmerica, and I've worked for several years now with the Project Spectrum communications and outreach teams, very happy to be here once again, hosting yet another webinar for Project Spectrum. One of the things I do is I work very closely with industry, government, academia, and particularly the Project Spectrum team. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to put that message out there and deliver those outreach materials to businesses and organizations that are looking to bolster their cybersecurity posture, looking to become a part of the defense supply chain. So let me just tell you just a bit about Project Spectrum. Project Spectrum is, of course, your no cost to the user resource for all different types of tools, training, and many other items. So as you can see here on the screen, what are the things that you could get at Project Spectrum? Well, you can get all types of artifacts, the assessment tools, the advisory services, everything from SSPs to POAMs, plans of action and milestones. You get one-on-one cyber advisory services, a self-assessment toolkit, cyber readiness dashboard. We have a SPURS score generation and upload, a remediation plan template. And then we also have the education and informational services, cybersecurity training and education, quite a few cybersecurity training modules available with Project Spectrum. We have blogs and news items that we're putting out there constantly, and then we have briefings just like this one, where, of course, we're giving you all of that great information. So monthly webinar series, monthly cyber circuit series, we're always happy to provide that information. And then we invite you to connect with Project Spectrum. So really what it is, it's all about the training webinars. And we want to make sure that you are understanding all of the information that is available to you through those training webinars. We have the projectspectrum.io. That is the Project Spectrum website. Project Spectrum website is, again, great resource. Register, no cost to the user. None of the tools, training, or resources available on the site are at any cost to the user. They are all available there for free for you and will help you to bolster your cybersecurity posture. If you're looking to reach the Project Spectrum team, you can do so via email, and that's at support@projectspectrum.io. And then, of course, we have social media. Social media, Project Spectrum is on LinkedIn, and you can follow them there. They also have a great YouTube channel where they're putting different videos like this one. This one's going to be up on the YouTube channel as well. So I want to make sure that you are getting all of that great information, making sure that you are taking advantage of everything that Project Spectrum has to offer. And speaking of that, one of the things that Project Spectrum has to offer today is this webinar, Cyber Circuits, where we are going to be talking to Mr. Earl Wyatt. So again, if you do have any questions, please make sure you're putting them in the chat. We'll be moderating that. The Project Spectrum Cyber Advisory team is on hand, and they can answer questions about cybersecurity services. The outreach team is available as well to answer any questions you have about the website. And of course, any questions that you have for our special guest today, we're more than happy to take those. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Mr. Earl Wyatt, Executive Director of MoveAmerica. Earl, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleased to do so. Thank you, Richard.
And we really do appreciate it. And again, I one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on here is, of course, you've had a very long and distinguished career in the Air Force. You've been very involved with technology and getting things ready for the warfighter. And so want to have you, first give a little bit of an introduction, give a bit of background on yourself as far as everything that you've done in your career that, has been helping the innovation in the defense industrial base.
Thank you. I appreciate that. like many members of the United States Air Force, getting an opportunity to work in weapon systems development is something that was something I sought to do. Not so very much because I wanted to develop weapons as much as I wanted to develop a capability so that we would never have to use the weapons. I oftentimes think that the most successful weapon systems are those that don't have to be used. Your adversary looks at you today and thinks maybe tomorrow is the best way to make that happen. And sometimes it's not so very much about the fact that you have one of those, but that you have as a nation an ability to mobilize and make as many of those as possible. So when I wasn't working specifically on a particular system, working to ensure that we had an industrial base that could be responsive to those needs and respond when an increased amount of that capability was required was also an important part of what I got a chance to do. So I've had the chance to work on some major systems that I have enjoyed. I worked on the B-2 program, got a chance to work on the F-16 program, got a chance to work on the Joint Strike Fighter program. I worked at DARPA for a while in the development of unmanned combat systems, and then got an opportunity to work within the department to accelerate capability getting to the warfighter when they needed it. And then working toward developing an emerging capability that says, couldn't forecast that we were going to have a need, but we see an opportunity or we see a potential threat. Can we respond in a much more rapid fashion without necessarily being urgent? So I've had more than enough opportunities to learn and know what doesn't work. And so sometimes that's equally as important as what you did that did work. And so it's extremely important to me and the ability of MoveAmerica to be able to help the nation respond. And in so doing, helping to ensure that we have a domestic industrial base capable of meeting the needs, national interest needs, not always national security, but certainly national interest needs, and where they parallel, that's ideal for us all.
And certainly one of those areas where the industrial base really needs to continue to move forward is through innovation. And that's really the topic of today. So how would you define innovation within the context of the DIB, and why is it vital for accelerating our national security and even, like you said, just advancing our nation as a whole?
A couple of things. The department buys weapon systems for two reasons, largely. And innovation is core to that. It's actually the introduction of new capabilities that allows us to accomplish missions that we can't accomplish today. And in certain circumstances, being more lethal by increasing the same level of survivability, being faster in terms of our ability to make decisions so that we can ensure that we know where we should engage and where we shouldn't. So for us, when I think about technology, I say, will this capability, will this technology, for example, it could be a system, it could be a process, it could be an algorithm, it could be a device. Will this enable us to do something that we currently do more cost effectively, therefore freeing up resources to do other things that the nation may want to spend money on? And so if I can do something more efficiently, that frees up money from the Department of Defense that may be able to go to the Department of Agriculture, Department of Homeland Security, that kind of a thing. And then the other, does it allow us to do something that we currently can't do today, but if we were able to do, we could end the war sooner or prevent somebody from a deterrence factor to prevent them from even engaging us. So from a defense perspective, more efficiency, or if you will, a major deterrent. And then in other areas, why I think it's so important that we accelerate it is having a domestic defense industrial base capable of meeting that need increases our independence and reduces our vulnerability. We learned during COVID, the COVID pandemic, that you can have the strongest relationship with an ally, but if they don't have the capacity to be able to produce for themselves, they certainly can't help produce for you. And so you have to have an ability. It may not be the most cost-effective way to do it, but you have to have an ability to be able to produce what you need for your national interest and your national security. And so we move to bring in those processes, we move to bring in those devices, those systems, those algorithms that will allow us to do the missions required, whether it's intelligence processing, whether it's propulsion, getting there faster, whether it's increasing the lift so that I can carry more supplies to wherever it has to be relocated. If we can do those things based on the domestic industrial base and do things and do it faster in terms of getting that capability to market faster, then we position ourselves in such a way that maybe we won't have to fight tomorrow. Or if we have to support an ally, we can make sure we get them what they need as soon as they need, so that therefore we put them in the best position to have a competitive advantage on the battlefield.
Now, the DoD, for years has been putting out this critical and emerging technologies list. They put it out every year. Over the past few years, have you seen any specific types of technologies or any key trends that have really emerged that are reshaping the industrial base?
I think there's true. There are several, but let me, if I could, I'd like to correct a little bit aspect of what you said. It's not just the DoD. Actually, that critical and emerging technology list includes agriculture. It includes, atmospheric concerns with weather, energy. So there's several components that come together to produce that list. But I think, without question, one, it's been critical to all of us. Cybersecurity, this topic that we're talking about here, that is an item on the critical and emerging technology list, and I don't think it's ever going to be. I think it's cyber something that we have to be paying very, very close attention to. Hypersonics, the fact that moving 5 times the speed of sound is important. I have an Air Force background, so speed is king with me. And getting there sooner, getting there faster, being able to outmaneuver your adversary is key. But weapon systems that fly at those speeds reduce your reaction time. And so therefore you have to be much more keen in terms of your sensor technologies to be able to detect those systems and be able to process a counter solution in a rapid fashion is equally as important. So we think of cyber, and we think of hypersonics, and we think of the idea of rapid response with our sensor systems. I'm going to also introduce one that I think we all know, but advanced manufacturing, the ability to be able to produce tangible goods in a smaller footprint, sometimes with advanced materials that can perform the same function and do so in a lighter, faster, quicker fashion is key. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't address artificial intelligence, where that's coming to play in terms of our ability to be able to make meaningful decisions with data that we have at our disposal. In some circumstances, it helped with logistics in ways that we hadn't thought about it. We have a lot of data that tells us what we should be doing with engines, but we have rules of thumb that were dictating when we took engines off of airplanes and put them in the phase to, if you will, get them regenerated, cleaned, and back out onto the carrier deck for the Navy or back out to the Air Force. And in the Army, most people don't recognize the Army probably has more aircraft than the Air Force has. But through AI, the logistics community learned that they could fly aircraft longer, wouldn't have to bring them in, adjust what metrics they could use. And in that fashion, they were able to then buy fewer, be able to, if you will, keep them longer and maintain a certain operational readiness at a lower cost for sustainment. So AI is not just helping us in terms of processing on the battlefield or in the command and control center, probably more suited than on the battlefield, but also in terms of the other things that we're using to make decisions to field weapon systems to put us in the best position to defend our interests. So I think under those circumstances, looking at AI, looking at hypersonics, looking at cyber technology, looking at our sensors, looking at advanced manufacturing. And then I think I have one more that I would probably like to add, and that's autonomous systems. The idea that we're using robotics and autonomous systems that help us with regard to accomplishing certain missions that are more dangerous or in some circumstances, maybe more dull. You don't want to use an individual to do that. It's somewhat repetitive, that can warn you when you should be paying attention. And in some circumstances, when you don't have sufficient manpower in a particular region, it may offer you equal amounts of capability without having to expand your critical manpower resources. Hope that was helpful.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of great information there. I mean, again, AI is something that people don't know whether or not to fear it or whether or not to embrace it. And again, I think it all depends on the circumstance. But even like when you were talking about hypersonics, because I can remember years ago when I was supporting a DARPA program, they were trying to put together an aircraft that would traverse the country in less than an hour. And the biggest challenge that they had was when you hit that speed, the materials that they used for the craft would melt. They couldn't handle it. So it's one of those things where again you've got to continuously emerge and evolve. And I think one of those things, or I think that's really happened because it's been the relationship between commercial innovation and military capability has really evolved over the past decade. Wouldn't you say so?
I certainly would. I mean, there's clearly in past decades, the military and I won't say just military, the industrial base supporting the Defense Department of the Defense Industrial Base was a major contributor to the commercial innovation that we enjoyed in America. And I think in some areas, there's still some sectors where that is key. But I would certainly think when it comes to information technology, particularly, military, the Department of Defense is a recipient or an adopter to the commercial innovation that's coming out of the private sector. There are things that we're still trying to, if you will, properly harness in an environment where cyber matters, where the durability of a rigorous military or an operational environment doesn't allow us to, if you will, incorporate it tomorrow. But we're working on those things. The speed upon which we process information, the volume of assets that we could track simultaneously. In some circumstances, the network and the volumes of data that we can stream across those networks is all benefiting from what's taking place in the commercial market and our ability to adapt that technology and therefore allow the Defense Department to expend a greater number of their resources or dollars in areas that aren't being pursued by the commercial community. But we're certainly trying to, or the Department of Defense, no longer need, but the Department of Defense is certainly taking advantage of the leadership in the commercial information technology arena.
And then, I know that over the past several years, there's been a really increased focus. I'll just say, I'll term it as that, an increased focus in, again, trying to reach out into the commercial sector to try to get that innovation into the defense industrial base. And a lot of it has to do with reaching the companies that aren't traditionally part of the defense industrial base, whether it's because of size or whether it's because of the years that they've been in existence. There are just always those less experienced businesses that have that innovation available but aren't able to get it. They aren't able to get it into the defense industrial base. And I know you deal with that a lot, particularly with the work at MoveAmerica, where it's always trying to get those less experienced companies to get into the defense industrial base. What are some of the major obstacles you see those companies encounter when they're trying to, get into government procurement?
There's a couple of them. Some is, for example, knowing who to go to. The idea is I have this wonderful processor that I think can reduce the time it takes for us to determine whether there's a real threat or not. Or I have this wonderful manufacturing capability that will allow me to increase my productivity without necessarily increasing my footprint of my factory. Who do I get a chance to talk to? That's one. We'll talk a little bit about that. Another one is traditional for all small businesses, or in some circumstances, those trying to do business with the Department of Defense. That's access to capital. I've demonstrated that I'm capable. My prototype is something that they want. And they've expressed a real commitment on their part to make that happen. But from the time that they have that to the time that they get it through the budget cycle and get it to the point that they're prepared to release a solicitation for me to respond to, could be 2 years. What am I doing though during those 2 years? If I could get access to capital so that I could, in some circumstance, begin to build a training program, or in some circumstances, increase my workforce. So as soon as that contract comes in, I'll have the staffing that I need, and I'll have them trained up to be prepared to do that. Access to capital is another one. In some circumstances, are there intermediate demonstrations that I could give? So while the end application is on track, there are intermediate functions that could be supported by what I'm doing. Who do I go to help me with that? There was a study that was done by the Department of Defense in the fall of 2021 that asked about barriers to doing work with the Defense Department. And what they identified was people said, I don't know who to go to. And it simply said, and I need mentoring. And in addition to that, I would like to have at least someone to guide me, along this very intricate activity, as well as access to capital. And so within the department, there was a concerted effort to respond to that. So there is what's now called the Apex Accelerator Office. That Apex Accelerator, there are 97 of them across the United States. Some associated with universities, some essentially municipally supported, and some, and I say supported, within the local community, and collaborates with the local municipality, and then some are associated with other industries. But these are offices where you can walk into the door and say, I have an interest in doing work with the federal government. In fact, they will also help you with the state and local government. They'll understand what it takes for you to be able to, if you will, qualify in terms of your having appropriate certifications, and work with you on terms of where you might be able to go to get assistance to make that happen. In addition to that, they could make you available, make you aware of what solicitations are best suited for your capability and who to talk to, and in some circumstances, when those solicitations will come out. That's an Apex Accelerator. The department also created a Defense Innovation Unit that's located with industry, other research areas that are also trying to help create an opportunity for innovation and innovators to go to talk to see how their process, their algorithm, their device, their system may be able to assist. And maybe the Department of Agriculture, maybe it's the Department of Energy, maybe it's the Department of Defense, but in essence, how to engage the federal government. So there's several entities that the department had tried to implement as a result of that survey that they conducted in the fall of 2021. But I would say the Apex Accelerators are a very good place to start when it comes to how to work with the Department of Defense or how to work with the federal government. And there are 97 throughout the nation. And so that's a really good place. And oh, by the way, when you go to them, it's not like you're going to ask and hope that they will help you. They get evaluated on how well they do help you. So for those interested in starting to do work with the federal government, and particularly the Department of Defense, Apex Accelerators are a very good place to go.
So, and that's fantastic, because of course, and again, I know through your experience, both when you were with the Department of Defense and now with MoveAmerica, again, it's always about trying to make sure that you're providing those resources. Now, I also know that one of the resources that we provide is not just telling people, again, how to get into the procurement process or to find help, but it's also trying to warn them about some of the more common pitfalls that can certainly hurt, a company's chance, to getting into the federal procurement cycle, to getting into the defense supply chain. What would you say are some of the most common pitfalls that the innovative companies who really want to bring their products and services to the supply chain should avoid when they're attempting to, bring that to market?
Rick, I'm glad you did ask this question because I didn't think about it earlier, but I'm glad you put it back on the table. And that is, if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a small business, if I'm an innovative performer, there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that I'm trying to do. And those are the things that can create some challenges. I obviously need access to capital, but where do I get the money from? If it's hard to get it from one box, do I go to the next box? And so foreign ownership, control, or influence is a major concern on the part of the federal government, taking funds from adversarial uh, uh, nation states in terms of a source of income could be a major challenge and could create some limitations into how readily the Department of Defense would be willing to work with you. But foreign direct investment isn't a bad thing. So knowing who to get money from and where your money comes from is extremely important. And the hard part is that everybody is not always as earnest or as candid as you'd like them to be. There are some adversary nations that are using shadow companies and the like to get access to innovative technologists, small, really bright, growing companies, so that on the one hand, they gain undue influence and in some circumstances, access to key components of the intellectual property of those innovators and have taken full advantage of them. Not only do they make it difficult for you to do some work with the department and your more mature state, but they will sometimes take advantage, take that technology, undermine your efforts, and leave the companies in a very poor state. So where you get the money from is extremely important, and doing due diligence, not just accepting, initially the fact that this is a company that several of my other colleagues have worked with before, and I'm pretty comfortable in taking funds for them. But you have to, if you will, take advantage of other, I'll call it tools for due diligence. The Department of Defense is working along those same lines. I think cybersecurity community can help you with it, but in large part, understanding where your money is coming from and being judicious in where you accept funds from. I know survival is key for your company, but in some circumstances, your survival could be compromised by taking them from the wrong sources, because they will take advantage and have a history of taking advantages of small and medium-sized companies. And in fact, they've actually taken advantage of a couple of them. In addition to that, the idea of my associations, obviously I need to network. I need to know the right people. I need to make sure that I'm getting in the right audiences, and I need to make sure that I'm given an opportunity to demonstrate my capability in the right venues. You also have to take a look at what affiliations and associations that you have. If it's associated with China, if it's associated with North Korea, if it's associated with Syria, if it's associated with Iran in particular, those companies or those countries have been identified as those that are a major concern for at least the Defense Department when it comes to affiliations. So, and again, they're just like the finance are not always as candid as to their relationships. And so it becomes extremely important to know who's connected to who you want to be connected to. And again, uh, what customers do you want to work with? And it's always good to reach out to those customers and let them know, I'm interested in doing some work with you. I'm being considered, or I want to participate in these particular committees or these particular associations. Is there anything that I need to be mindful of? And I think in those circumstances, uh, caution is a great advisor when it comes to establishing affiliations in the networks that you want to be associated with. Sometimes it's driven by, the politics of today. You want to make sure that you align yourself appropriately. You just have to make sure from a federal sector that who you're aligning yourself with is who they actually are, not who they advertise to be. And that if there's something to be known about them, you've done your due diligence to make sure that you know as best you can about who you're associated with. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And a lot of what you were talking about, I think, falls into that bucket that, has become a really big has become a really big, I don't want to say buzz term because it's much more serious than that, but it's FOCI. It's foreign
Yes.
ownership, control, and influence. And I know Project Spectrum offers a training course on FOCI. I know MoveAmerica recently presented a webinar and produced a study about FOCI. So, that is certainly something that has a lot of people getting very nervous, not just within government circles, but within the commercial sector as well. Because, again, like you said, it's not who you think you're talking to, it's who you're actually talking to. Because sometimes we think that perception becomes reality, but it's really not. They tend to mask things very well.
Exactly. And the FBI, is very good to help with that. They have examples of where people have been taken advantage of and trying to help companies be aware and take certain precautions or asking certain questions. And so I think it's important that we try to use all of the arms of the government, that can help us with regard to information that will help protect uh, uh, the intellectual property of our companies, the economic competitiveness of our countries. And if we can do that, then we enhance our ability for our own national security. Because again, it's the companies, it's the innovators, the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the Northrops bring a lot to the table, but they also are major customers of the smaller components of the industrial base, the second and third tier suppliers, and their ability to work with companies that have been compromised is also a challenge. And so working with the people who you want to work with, the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the Northrops, the Raytheons, among others, will also be a reasonable source. If you've been working with them in the past, invite you to continue to do so and ask those questions. But what's on their list? What should I want to do some work with you? Is there something I need to be mindful of? And I think they'd be inclined to let you know that. And so I think we try to find as many sources of information as possible. What I can get from the federal government, what I get from my colleagues that are also equally scrutinized for the efforts that we're going to work together with. And so if they can pass that level of scrutiny, I want to know what they're doing and see what I can do to put myself in the best position possible.
And now, again, I know your experience, particularly with the defense industrial base, you've been on both sides of the equation. You've been within the Pentagon, you've been outside the Pentagon, again, trying to help those emerging technologies get to the defense industrial base, or as we said, even just the federal supply chain, because it could be other agencies. So I have to think that through all of your years of experience, along with the areas that people should be concerned about, you've also seen what approaches work when you're a company that you believe has some type of innovation that could really pay itself forward as far as getting up to the federal level, or even again the state or local level, but mostly the federal level is where a lot of people are concerned about these days, trying to get into federal contracting. Are there any types of strategies or approaches that you believe businesses that are seeking partnerships with federal agencies should adopt?
There's a couple, and it depends on where I am in terms of the maturity of my idea or my concept or my capability. And I bring that up is because um, the federal government is great for working with entities, but they won't ever mass produce them. So there's no threat of what I'm going to call competition with the federal government. And I bring that up because I believe that working with the laboratories, if I'm an early stage developer, I've got a concept that I know has merit. I'm just not exactly sure of the appropriate applications, but I know that it has merit for a particular service or a particular agency. I would approach that service or that agency and find out, do they have a specific lab? If it's a service, they do have. Army Research Lab, Navy Research Lab, Air Force Research Lab. If it's an agency, they may use a national lab, Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge, PNNL. But I would do what I can to do a cooperative agreement with that particular laboratory so that I could begin to work with them on an emerging challenge or a challenge that they already know. Why is that important? Because in the laboratory, we know and they know what we currently have fielded. They know what the next generation is. And if you're working in a cooperative agreement with the laboratory. That laboratory wants that technology to be brought in by industry. Industry is the vehicle upon which innovation actually enters the weapon system. And so they will work very well and look forward to working with industry that wants to work on their problems. So if there's a service or an agency that your technology is most applicable to apply to, then the thought is that's a really good first step. In addition to that, I mentioned a couple of entities like DIU, and I mentioned a Defense Innovation Unit, and I mentioned the Apex Accelerator. But what I didn't mention was two others that the services, their X offices, the AFWorks for the Air Force or Naval X, they identify challenges. And with those challenges, if your technology has an ability to be able to address those challenges, they're a marvelous group upon which to go to be able to highlight your concept, let them know what it is and how you believe that you can achieve that, and then bid. They oftentimes will hold, at least the Air Force in particular, will hold pitch days where you get an opportunity and they'll invite you based on your initial dialogue to come give a pitch, and they will look to put you on contract in a very short order, addressing that concern that we had regarding access to capital. So those two things immediately come to mind, in addition to the cooperative agreements or creatives where you can work with the laboratory. In addition to that, there are programs like the Joint Capability Technology Demonstrator Program. There are programs like the RISE program within OSD that take technology that have a prototype that can be adapted to a DoD mission, and they will have combatant commands identify opportunities for you to, if you will, submit a candidate for demonstration and get invited to a venue where you can bring your technology, your component, your system, and demonstrate it in an operational-like environment. Again, some of the more mature technologies can take advantage of that vehicle, but there's several. And that's why I promote the idea of using an Apex Accelerator, because part of what that community can do is help with regard to where we need to go based on the maturity of your particular activity. But whether it's associated with an early stage, working with the laboratory to formulate it, whether it's associated with working with a Naval X or an AFWorks entity that is looking at an application, whether it's associated with the Small Business Innovative Research community or the STTR community, both the National Science Foundation as well as the Department of Defense offers opportunities for SBIRs, Small Business Innovative Research. That track has been very, very successful in terms of inviting innovators, companies to promote or at least to present a solution to an identified challenge. They will identify challenges that they have and then create an opportunity for an open submission. It's not identified as a challenge or a problem, but it's something that you may have an idea that affords the department or the federal community to get an understanding of what you can do that may be something they hadn't thought about in a while or didn't think that application could be employed. So the SBIR activity is another one. And then there's one more that I'd like to also bring up, and that is the Mentor Protege Program. The Mentor Protege Program, again, responds to some 13 or so defense agencies that those agencies identify what a challenge or the challenges that they have, and they look for established performers, people who have done work with the Department of Defense before. It could be a medium company. Again, it could be a larger company, but the idea of teaming with a protege, somebody who that medium-sized company believes or has worked with in the past, that could be developed to the point of being a standalone contractor or a preferred sub to respond to defense concerns. And so in the Mentor Protege Program, the teaming of a mentor and a protege to address a Department of Defense challenge, where they bring their technology, working with the mentor, but in essence, the mentor will help them with developmental or maybe technology transition of that technology to bring that forward so that at the end of a 2 year, it could be 1, 2, or 3 years, by the end of that third year program, that protege is capable of being a preferred sub or a standalone performer for the Department of Defense. So there's a crater, there is the X programs, there is the Silver Sitter activities, and there is the Mentor Protege program as pathways that have all led to success for companies wanting to do work with the federal government and in particular Department of Defense.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned the Mentor Protege program, because that was something that I definitely wanted to ask about, because I know MoveAmerica has a very unique role when it comes to Mentor Protege in acting as the Mentor Protege program intermediary and really helping to take that program forward. Because if I'm correct, the Mentor Protege program for 30 some years was a pilot. Probably one of the longest pilots I've ever heard running in the federal government. But then just in the last 2 years, it was made into a permanent program, correct?
That's correct. And the Mentor Protege program has a history of providing capability to advance systems like the Joint Strike Fighter program, like the Zoom Wall Destroyer. I can't remember all of those that they have, again, using mentors, using proteges to help contribute to not only the development of systems that are going to be deployed, but developing of an industrial base so that we can go back to those same suppliers and performers, for future systems. They become familiar with how the department does business. They make sure that their systems are ISO certified, and in some circumstances, how to best address the longevity requirements or the rigors that are associated with the Department of Defense mobility and supply system. But yes, MoveAmerica has a role right now. With the establishment of the Mentor Protege program as a permanent program, there were certain things that Congress wanted to see. Obviously, a more streamlined operation, obviously increased capacity, wanted to see as many programs as possible. Well, sometimes that's a challenge when you're a service or a defense agency. Increasing your capacity without necessarily increasing your manpower can oftentimes be a difficult challenge. So MoveAmerica's role to assist the defense agencies is to, if you will, when a defense agency has identified that there is a concern, there is an area that they would like to see increased competition, or they would like to make sure that there's a domestic sources of supply, they identify that particular concern or issue, and then offer it to the Mentor Protege program so that mentors and proteges can establish a relationship. We're not eHarmony.com. We don't necessarily see if we can do the matchmaking. But when a team comes to MoveAmerica with the intent of addressing a particular concern, or they go to the service and identify themselves, what MoveAmerica will do is make sure that they know who to work with. In most circumstances, we will help them with regard to how best to characterize, not when I say how best to characterize, what's required for them to be able to be eligible. If they meet the eligibility requirements, that will be great. If they don't, we will let them know what they need to do to become eligible. And then when eligible, if they form the team, they can propose their solution. We act as a conduit. We don't do the evaluation, but we act as a conduit to make sure that their complete submission is provided to the federal or defense agency. The defense agency then approves, selects, or requests with some modification, a full proposal, and then they will evaluate it. They be in the government agency, and once the government agency says yes, this is a viable activity, we believe that this will yield what we want to, the cost associated with it and the timeline is appropriate, they will direct, the MoveAmerica will put them on subcontract, and then we will assist in terms of managing that particular endeavor with the federal agency to ensure that as many as they can and the department can afford we'll help them with the management of them so that if an agency didn't have a program this year, but is capable because of the effectiveness of the submission on the part of the mentor and protege, grow to 5 programs, and the next year, MoveAmerica will help them with the management of their activity.
No, and that's fantastic. And I know, particularly when it comes to mentor protege, I love the fact that you mentioned that you don't do the matchmaking, because I think that's one of the misperceptions that the less experienced contractors who want to come in as protege companies think. They think that somebody is going to be there to help match them with a mentor, and that's really not the way that it works. But there are opportunities for them to try to get in the same room. I think one of those is coming up in April with the Mentor Protege Summit.
Yeah, you're correct about that. Now, while we're not responsible for the matchmaking or take a role in that, what we do is we will hold events where we invite mentors, established mentors, and invite those who are interested in becoming proteges, and then allow them to tell what they do, develop a relationship, talk if they want to, and if they believe that that's a relationship that they would like to pursue, then they collectively will team and then come back to the department. So you're right about that. On the, I want to say the 25th of March in Miami, Florida, Dade County, Miami, we will be holding a pre-MPP summit. That's currently the plan. As information becomes more available, I think we'll make sure that that information is put on the appropriate website. And again,
absolutely. Yep, we'll make sure that we're sharing that with the Project Spectrum folks, and also on our MoveAmerica LinkedIn page. I do want to make sure that we're giving time for questions, because we have a couple that are coming in. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to one question, because I think it ties into with everything we've been sort of talking about, and maybe allow you to expand on things a little bit more. So Vince is asking, focusing on small and medium businesses, SMBs, regarding the categories of technology that you described, what national defense relevant industries and technologies are most dependent on SMBs, and therefore should be priorities for either DoD or Project Spectrum or the Office of Small Business Programs?
Interesting. I would think if I'm associated with advanced manufacturing, computer generated manufacturing, 3D printing in some circumstances, I think that's one of those where small businesses have an opportunity of being able to play a key role, because in many ways, some of the major weapon systems still have small business requirements in order to satisfy their government requirements, which say we have to go to a small business for a certain percentage of this particular contract. So if you can help with the manufacturing of components, that helps. Obviously, we're not looking for the small businesses to do a major wing, but I think it helps. If we're involved with robotics, the idea of sensing, if you will, processing and actuating, I think that helps. Autonomous systems, cybersecurity comes to mind, where small businesses, I think, have an opportunity to participate, where you're less likely to acquire a major performer, or if I'm a major performer, where would I go that I think I can allocate my weapon system, to components that I can get from the small business industry. I think in those particular areas, that's true. In the cyber, in the hypersonics arena, very, very challenging. You highlighted again the frictional effects, metals become liquids, in those circumstances, and how do I dissipate heat? Advanced materials helps more in the early stages, or, basically if you have an ability to be able to work with certain materials that have increased temperature capacities, that helps a lot. In the space arena, again, communications and integrations of communications, those are areas that, again, small businesses can participate. We have microsats that go up. High schools are launching microsats. So in some circumstances, obviously, small businesses can and be a major contributor in those particular areas. Those immediately come to mind. If I think advanced manufacturing, I think of some autonomous systems. I think cyber is going to be required in everything we do. We need to understand, be prepared to, and protect the networks and confirm the integrity of the information that flows through our networks. And so I think if you're a small business and you have the ability to be able to provide that, and remember, you can provide that as a small business to other small businesses that are looking to participate in those environments that can't necessarily afford maybe some of the more exotic solutions, but they need an effective and a tailored solution to meet their needs. Those immediately come to mind, but I'm sure if we got a chance to think a little bit more, we could probably come up with a few more options.
Well, and I think those are definitely a great start and give a great amount of information. Just want to remind anybody, as we have a few minutes left, if you do have a question for Mr. Wyatt, please do put it in the chat. We'll go ahead and pose it to him. If it's a question that is really something for the Project Spectrum team, they'll go ahead and respond in the chat. So there is one question that I want to ask you, because when you and I were preparing for this is something that came up that I'm dying to hear your answer for. You've talked about innovation, and you've given some great examples about what is innovation and what are innovative technologies. If you're a company that, again, is not experienced with being part of the defense supply chain or being part of the federal procurement or anything like that, what would you say isn't innovation, or what is misperceived as innovation that really isn't innovative, or even, what is it that could inhibit innovation?
Well, let's do a couple of things. When to say that something is not innovative, the interesting thing is it could be, but it may not be relevant to a particular customer base. And so to them, they would say it's not innovative, but it may be. It may be a new way of doing something that currently exists, but that has no application to that particular arena. I think the most important thing is to be relevant. So you have to determine whatever it is that you're looking at, who could benefit most from it, or who could be hurt most by not having access to it. That becomes critical. And so if I'm developing a counter to a potential weapon of mass destruction, I would like to say, okay, if I can produce this particular threat, who would I go to? And there is the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. The idea is there is an entity within the federal government that clearly would be somebody that I should give a call to. But that's easy. Let's say I have something that can be used across multiple agencies. And who do I go to first? Do I go to the Department of Agriculture first? Now, I'm not necessarily specifically concerned about agriculture, but I know that they could benefit from what's taking place. Who do I go to that would need my activity most, and where my competition may not be as keen? When I was in the department, my rule was find out what was considered to be a significant or higher risk where the current approach was inadequate. So therefore, if I produced something, I avoided what was called the Valley of Death. The Valley of Death is identified as a place or an area where in the development of systems that it's a good system, but it isn't the system that the department feels, based on integration, based on cost, based on reliability, that they would like to put above other systems. And so therefore, I went to one where if I produced anything, it was better than what they currently had, and they needed something yesterday. So you have to be relevant first. Then the next thing is, where can I be most effective? So they need it, it's relevant to their role, but if I'm looking at boiling the ocean, that's unrealistic. What part of the ocean can I be most effective? Then that's where I want to address. So the idea of this is the problem set for your particular agency. This is the challenge that I would like to take on, and I want to demonstrate for you my ability to be able to make that happen. So if I'm a new person coming in and I want to do something that either currently exists more cost effectively, one form of innovation, or do something that doesn't exist at all, that's part of innovation / invention. The idea that I'm doing something that hasn't been done before or more cost effectively. Will you, one, benefit most by it, or two, be hurt most by not participating. That's who I want to talk to first. And then with that, what part of that problem set can I be most effective first to make that happen? A lot of times we think that our best place is to go to somebody who's developing the next generation system. It might be go to the depot that's providing support for a legacy system, because your technology, your innovation may be more cost effective than what they're buying today, or what they're buying today they can no longer get. The manufacturer that's producing that activity no longer wants to produce it, and you may put yourself in the best position to be that next level supplier. That would be going through my mind.
Very good. We are coming to the top of the hour, so we are coming up on our time. I apologize if there are any questions that we did not get to answer, but we'll certainly do our best to try to provide answers after the fact. But Earl, just one last opportunity. If there are any takeaways you would like someone to have from this chat that we've had, say like one or two, what would those be?
The services want innovation. They also are limited in dollars, and they're limited sometimes in terms of how they can get access to you. So by using the Apex accelerators, by recognizing that every service has an Office of Small Business Programs, finding out who that happens to be in their org chart, by working with the Department of Defense, OSD has an Office of Small Business Programs. That's an ideal location. Identifying those offices that are there specifically to work with small businesses. I would also say that every major contractor actually have a small business liaison office. That's another source. But recognize the fact is that you want to produce something that other people want to buy, and you just have to find out who are the buyers or who are the people who are setting requirements for that. So if it's an Apex accelerator, if it's a rapid innovation accelerator, if it's an Office of Small Business Programs for a specific service, or the department, those are good places to start.
Fantastic. Well, we certainly do appreciate all of the information you shared. And again, for those of you who are looking for more guidance, Apex Accelerator is a great place to go. MoveAmerica is certainly somebody that can help. MoveAmerica.org is the website. And then you can also find MoveAmerica on LinkedIn. Mr. Wyatt, again, thank you so much for taking the time today. We appreciate everything. And, we look forward to seeing you in Miami and in Puerto Rico at the pre-summit and the summit events.
More than glad to come. And on days like today, I'm even more happy to be here. Thank you so much. Take care.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining us. For the entire Project Spectrum team and for the MoveAmerica team, thank you for joining Cyber Circuits today. We hope you found the information extremely helpful. And remember, we are always just a few clicks away, whether it's visiting websites, email, social media. We're always happy to help you out. So again, on behalf of everyone at Project Spectrum and MoveAmerica, thanks for joining us today for Cyber Circuits. Have yourself a wonderful day and a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you again soon.
So long.